Welcome to the September 23rd, 2021 electronic meeting of the Environmental Commission. This meeting is in accordance with executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-853-5247 or toll free also 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 987-1499-1238. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. So, Galen, would you like to read the land heritage statement?
Sure. Land heritage statement. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Bodewadmi, and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals. And that is the land use statement.
Thank you, Galen. Do you want to make the roll call?
Sure.
Please note that we have two new commissioners. We have Edith Juneau joining us for the first time as a representative from the Energy Commission, and we have Ann Marson joining us as our representative from the Parks Advisory Commission. So we'll let them introduce each other after the roll call is finished.
All righty. Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Needham. Commissioner Needham. Councilmember Dish.
Present.
Right. Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Griswold.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Callywart.
Here.
Chairperson Brown.
Present in Ann Arbor.
John Mursky. Commissioner Mursky.
No, he's been substituted by Edith Juneau.
Okay. All righty. Vice Chairperson Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Vandenbroek.
Here.
Commissioner Oriole.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Zane.
Here in Ann Arbor.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. So, as I mentioned before, Edith Juneau is a member of the Energy Commission who's replaced John Mursky as our representative here. Edith, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Edith. I go by Edie usually. I've been in Ann Arbor since 2017. I moved here for graduate school at the University of Michigan, where I studied environmental policy and conservation ecology. Since then, I've worked at the World Resources Institute and the National Wildlife Federation, and working currently on climate and forest issues. So happy to be here and representing the Energy Commission as well.
Thanks for joining us. And Ann Marson, is she present? No, I don't think so. I just got the email today. So we'll see her next month. So, but she was just assigned to us from the Parks Advisory Commission at their meeting yesterday. So the next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. However, this is the time when we need to elect new officers. The offices are chair and vice chair. I'm Stephen Brown, I'm the current chair, and Rita Mitchell is the current vice chair. Do I have a mission for nominations to chair for the coming year? Lisa? Oh, you're muted.
I would nominate Stephen Brown as chair and Rita Mitchell as vice chair moving forward. Can I do it that way?
Is there a second? I guess Chris Graham is seconding.
Yep.
Are there any nominations?
Wonderful.
Thank you. Are there any nominations? Further nominations? All who would agree with the slate, raise your hand or say aye. Aye. Well,
Congratulations and thank you.
I don't see any no votes. Hearing none, no abstentions either. It passes unanimously. Thank you so much. It's an honor to lead this group. I promise I'll do the best I can. So now let's move on to the agenda. Is there a motion to, are there any motions to add or alter the agenda?
Yeah, I would like to include a discussion of endorsing the carbon dividends and pricing Act HR 2307, as I sent an email to you guys earlier yesterday.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Kathy, all who are in favor, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
I see. All who are opposed, say no. Hearing or seeing none. Are there any abstentions? Okay, then Chris Graham is abstaining.
Sorry, don't know enough.
Okay, so that's fine. So we shall add that onto the agenda, and it seems like the proper point would be we'll add it to new business. We'll add it at the end of new business. Right before the reports from committees, other commissions, council, and chair. All right, thank you for bringing up that topic, young one. So the agenda is approved with that addition. So the next item on the agenda is the first public commentary period. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up for up to 3 minutes. Please call 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 987-1499-1238. That's meeting ID number 987-1499-1238. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And be patient, there can be a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. So Galen, is there anybody on the line?
There's no one on the line.
Okay, well, we'll wait 30 seconds. Is there anyone on the line as yet?
No, there's no one on the line.
Okay, well, this ends the first public commentary period. People will have an opportunity, a second opportunity to offer public commentary at the end of the meeting. So we move on to special presentations. The first one is the Water Department presentation. So this is about the consideration of whether to continue. The options are to continue getting our intake water from the Huron River and our well field, and rehabilitating the current, at the current site, rehabilitating the waterworks, or getting our raw water from the Great Lakes Water Authority. So there's a presentation, and so I think, so let's, the floor, I'll give Glenn and Brian Steglitz the floor. Let's see if they can get the presentation up and running.
All right, well, thank you very much. And I'm going to let Glenn will load up our slides and share his screen. I appreciate the opportunity, Chairperson Brown, and thank you for adding us at a late moment onto your agenda. We were requested by City Council to share and get some feedback from the Environmental Commission from the council meeting. So I'm glad we were able to work this out so quickly. So thank you. Can I just get a confirmation that you can hear me okay? I can see.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. So we've shared this presentation. I think it's been shared with you. So I'm not going to go through the full presentation that we gave council because I understand your time is limited. So we'll have an opportunity to answer questions, but I would like to just share a few points, and Glenn will advance the slides for me. So next slide, please, Glenn. So as a little bit of background, our water treatment plant, I think many of you are familiar with, was built in 1938. So we're still using what I like to call infrastructure 1.0. And based on feedback we've received from our regulators about some of the performance of the legacy equipment and processes, as well as just the general condition and the maintenance required, this has been planned for replacement for many years. And back in 2015, we reevaluated a whole bunch of alternatives before we were making a significant investment in rehabilitating the water treatment plant. And that's the report that's been shared, and that I'll go through a couple of the points with you tonight. So next slide, Glenn. So in 2015, before we were going to make a decision to invest, upwards of $100 million in the water treatment plant, it made sense for us to really evaluate what other alternatives were available to us. So we looked at, constructing a new water treatment plant in a new location, expanding our well field, joining a regional water provider. And of course, that is the Great Lakes Water Authority, who's the closest one and probably the only authority that would be able to serve a community the size of Ann Arbor. Recognized in 2015, the Great Lakes Water Authority was only a year old, so they were really still in their infancy at the time. And so we looked at all of these alternatives, and we used the decision analysis tool to evaluate a lot of the pros and cons associated with these against several criteria. And really only two of the alternatives really fell out as really being feasible, them being connecting to a regional water authority and reinvesting in the city's water treatment plant. And all of that is incorporated in the 2015 study. And just before we move to the next slide, you can see on the left side of your screen, two dashed areas, one in red and one in green. And the one in green is the original plant. So that was built in 1938 and 1949. And that's what we're focused on, is replacing that component of the treatment process, and not focusing at this point in time on replacing the portion of the plant that's in the red box. Next slide, Glenn. So we talked about the two alternatives. So the first one, rehabilitate the water treatment plant. So I'll share a few of the results from that. And then the next slide is identifying the connection to the Great Lake Water Authority. And can you move on to the next slide, Glenn? And then this identifies some of the infrastructure involved in that. So, we're talking about 30 miles, close to 30 miles of water main connecting existing points in the Great Lakes Water Authority system to Ann Arbor. And this is large diameter through a lot of well-developed area. So fair, substantial cost in getting that infrastructure in place. And it also involves some storage, additional storage potential, as well as some pumping stations. Next slide. So I want to spend a couple minutes talking about this, because this is really where we looked at criteria and compared the two alternatives. So you'll see the evaluation criteria on the left, and then we have these green, yellow, and red squares denoting relative risk associated with the alternatives. Green being better or lower risk, and red being higher risk. So if we quickly go down the list, the risk to source water quality, this is something that has been brought up by several since the presentation that we gave to council, and questioning, why is the city's source water considered maybe a higher risk than the Great Lakes Water Authority source water. And really, we're talking both about inland river water supply. So the future really holds a lot of unknowns associated with inland rivers. There could be development, there could be a lot of impacts that we're just not aware of, because we're talking about planning horizons decades into the future. But based on what we know right now, we do know we have some, threats to our source water in Ann Arbor, one of those being PFAS from an upstream manufacturer. And right now, there aren't similar types of threats that are known in the Detroit River system, which is why we conservatively identified, based on what we know right now, the city's water source as potentially a higher risk. But I think that's probably open for interpretation, and some have thought that maybe that really the risk associated with both of those water sources are the same. The next is risk to treated water quality. So why is the city's water system have a lower risk related to treated water quality? And that really has to do with changing the disinfectant that would be required if we were going to be joining a regional water authority. The Great Lakes Water Authority uses a different final disinfectant than the city does. That transition is likely to create substantial water quality challenges, just because of the distribution system has been accustomed to seeing the disinfectants we're using. So while it is possible to change disinfectants, and that there are other communities that have done it, there is a learning curve, and we will probably have water quality problems for some amount of time. It could be upwards of a year or more if we were going to transition to a different makeup of drinking water, which we would be doing if we were joining the regional water supply. And then the next four: ability to respond to community value, city's carbon footprint, schedule, impact on cost. I think those are all pretty intuitive. Obviously, if we're maintaining control of the water system, we are better able to reflect the values and decisions that we make. The city's carbon footprint, we can implement the sustainability A20 and sustainability criteria and goals that are established by council, and much more easily if we had the autonomy of controlling the water system ourselves. If we join a regional water authority, we're going to be one of over 100 member partners. So we'll have a voice, but it will be, it'll be one of a lot, and maybe not have the same influence that we would have in making decisions that we would if we maintain control of the water system. And then the last item on the list is impact on annual cost, and I'll talk a little bit more about the cost, but it's clear to us that connecting to the regional water supply would have a substantially higher cost than if we were just to rehabilitate the city's water treatment plant. Next slide, Glenn. So this is what was estimated and escalated into $2021 from the 2015 study. So we're talking about $100 million for rehabilitating a water treatment plant compared to over $350 million for all of that infrastructure that we'd have to put in to connect to the Great Lakes Water Authority. Next slide. When you annualize that and you look at our annual revenue requirements, and we built that up through these two bar graphs, you have a whole bunch of costs that the city would incur under both alternatives. Because even if we were to join a regional water authority, we would still be responsible for billing, planning, managing the distribution system. So there's a lot of administrative and operational costs that we would have to maintain under both solutions. However, if we were going to be joining a regional water authority, we wouldn't be needing to do as much water treatment. So the reinvestment in the city's water treatment plant wouldn't be necessary. However, there may be some minor modifications because it's likely that we would have to do some minimal amount of treatment. That's pretty common, given the distance we would be from the source of the water that we would be receiving. So a lot smaller component is the water treatment with the regional water authority solution. However, when you add in the fee structure that the Great Lakes Water Authority has, which is based on distance, basically capacity to serve. So because we're further, we're going to pay more per unit than someone who is closer because of the cost that the Great Lakes Water Authority would have to deliver those services to us at such a distance. So we built in what we think based on other comparable member partners, what those costs would be, and that's built into the alternative 2 cost as that purchased water cost is estimated. And then the next couple bars on both sides are associated with debt service and capital costs that we would anticipate being needed to implement the recommendations associated with two alternatives. And as you build these up, you can see the annual revenue requirements associated with each alternative becomes sort of a bit different, with the alternative one, is rehabilitating the city's water treatment plant, being substantially lower than the regional alternative. Next slide. So our recommendations that we made at the meeting on September 13th to council was to proceed with the conceptual design to upgrade the water treatment plant. And it is our intention to bring that resolution to council in the coming months. The next slide. So in addition to doing that, there was at least one council member who identified that they would be interested in us pursuing within a little more detail what the true costs of connecting to the regional water authority were. So we intend to, at this point in time, unless we hear differently from council, we will likely bring that that option forward in some fashion at a council meeting for their debate and consideration. And if council decides that they want us to continue to investigate that, then we would have a cost and a schedule associated with that work. We anticipate that would cost us about $300,000 and probably add a year to 2 years to the schedule to do the full thorough evaluation. There's a fair bit of engineering that's involved in that would be necessary to be done by both the city and the water authority in order for them to actually provide a proposal to us on what the cost of connection would be. So if that's something that council wants, it would be something that additional work that we would have to incur. If council decides that that's not something that they would wish to entertain, then we can just move. We cannot, waste that time and move right on to the preliminary design for rehabilitating the water treatment plant. And I think that is our last slide. And at this point, I guess I'll open it up for questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I see John Callowart, Commissioner Callowart has his hand up.
Sure, thanks. Appreciate the presentation. I was wondering if we could go back to the slide with the red, yellow, and green circles in your analysis. Great, yes. So this is really helpful. Just had a couple of questions to kind of understand the work that's been done here. With the risk to source water quality, was there any type of modeling done to kind of model the impact of development over the next 50 or so years? I understand why it's, you mentioned that generally, but I'm wondering what's the data or the modeling and analysis behind that?
Yeah, there hasn't been any formal modeling. This is really based on our understanding of the source water, the two watersheds, what the land uses are in those watersheds, and what the risks are. So I would say that that's much more of a subjective category or evaluation than objective.
Okay, thank you. And then 2 other questions. Is there, maybe I missed it, but is there an opportunity cost associated, a lower opportunity cost associated with joining the authority now that is reflected or maybe not reflected in the cost estimates that you're sharing? I mean, if this would be delayed 20 years, is there any way of knowing that it would cost twice as much at that point?
Yeah, difficult question to answer. I mean, their cost model looks at, I think there's a lot of complexity built into how which is the reason why we're informing council that it probably would take a year and several $100,000 worth of work to get to the point where we can actually get a proposal. They look at what legacy capacity that they have, which they have right now. Will they have that in 20 years or not? I don't know. So there's a lot of conditions. They're doing their own modeling. Right now, they're mothballing water treatment plants. They have excess capacity. So very much would like to bring Ann Arbor on as a member partner because they have the capacity to serve us right now. But so it just would be hard to really know in the future about how that would look. I would anticipate, I don't think that their area is growing that substantially that they wouldn't have the capacity to bring us on several decades down the road if that was something that for some reason that the city would be considering.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I realize that there's a lot of what ifs built into it. And then the last question that I have is, how does it work with the authority, bringing lines across multiple municipalities? Is there a risk, that we might be blocked if one municipality along the proposed route, doesn't want the line through their community, or does the authority kind of supersede all of that?
I don't have a tremendous amount of experience in knowing how that would work, but I would anticipate a lot of this would be going most of it would be going in road right-of-ways, and I would anticipate that between the communities that we'd be able to work those kinds of things out. This is, I think, a pretty common thing that happens. So I think we'd be able to get the infrastructure in place to make it happen if that was the direction we were going to go.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Shannon, you have your hand up. And then Kathy.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is just in terms of the water quality piece. I know that the Great Lakes Water Authority draws from Lake Huron and the Detroit River. Detroit River is also the source of where, because of Detroit's combined sewer system, there are lots of times where, because of excessive, like big events, rain events, it just spills, their raw sewage spills directly into the river. And so I'm just wondering if that, in terms of the quality piece that you were looking at, that was considered. I don't know if they just basically kind of shocked the system with a lot of chlorine to be able to deal with things like that. I just know that since we are lucky enough to have our stormwater and our sanitary system disconnected, we just don't have that same kind of risk. And I'm just wondering if that was considered within the water quality discussion between the two alternatives as well.
Glenn, I'm not sure. Are you able to go to we have a slide with more detail on each of these evaluation criteria. Do you want to go to that one and we can identify what was included? So this is the more detailed comparison, and I think this was provided to you. These were the things we looked at from a source water quality. So I don't think it looked at sewer backups, it looks like, but our consultant is pretty familiar with the Detroit system, and I'm not sure that this overflows that you're talking about impact necessarily the water supply. I just don't know the answer to that question, and we can investigate that more and see. I guess I would anticipate that maybe it doesn't. But all that being said, we wouldn't have a choice in terms of where we get our water from if we connect. I mean, it's how the system is configured and designed, and because that source is going to be the closest to Ann Arbor, we'll primarily be getting water from that particular plant.
Right. The other question I have is, did you all look at kind of climate scenarios in terms of the Huron River having flows that were too low for the future? Was that ever part of the discussion? Because I know most of ours, comes from Barton Pond and things like that. Was that ever part of the evaluation?
So we looked at drought contingency as part of a master plan that we did back in 2000. So we have, contingency plans, and we did look a little bit at what but I mean, this is a renewed issue, right? I mean, climate change has been progressing, and it would probably be something we would need to relook at, and make sense to be part of the scope of the work as we pursue this, but it wasn't really captured in this particular analysis. I guess my thought on that is, and we've been seeing, much more, more violent storms, less frequent. So definitely the climate change that we've been experiencing over the last 5 to 10 years has made the river more flashy. We haven't had since, I think, maybe 2003, like a drought condition where we were concerned about not being able to extract enough water out of the river. We have plans to address that if that were the case.
Okay.
But I think based on what our projections are, it seems like that there would be ample capacity of the river to be able to meet the needs of the community, at least in average, for sure, in average day conditions.
Okay, great. Yeah, I agree with you. It seems, I've heard that prediction before, but it seems like it's more that we're getting sort of crazy big events, rather than, but who knows, where this is all going,
Right.
I guess, too. And then I guess,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to just mention, also we do have blended sources. So if we were in some type of an extended drought condition, we're fortunate that we have a river supply and a well supply. And some of our future plans include augmenting that well supply. We haven't had the need to do that, but I would anticipate, if we did have some upcoming years with more severe drought conditions, I would anticipate that we would maybe move that up in our capital improvement plan to augment our well supply. So we were able to, for example, provide an average day just with groundwater.
Yeah, okay. And then since you've got this slide up too, just wondering about the dioxane issue. And
recording in progress.
If you could just kind of summarize where you all fell with that in terms of what is, I'm sure you all have been following this closely.
Yes, and we are following it closely. From the city's perspective right now, our approach is to make sure that we have monitoring in place to intercept the plume, if it does decide to migrate towards our water supply. We have sentinel wells included for next fiscal year in our capital improvement plan. And the intent is that those would be located strategically between the leading edge of the plume and Barton Pond to be able to detect contamination with time for us to make decisions and intervene. It's my personal belief that whether it's the Eagle or EPA or whoever ends up regulating and overseeing this cleanup, that they will not allow the contamination to migrate and impact towards the city's water supply, that intervention would be implemented before that would happen. All that being the case, we have been asked to identify how much it would cost if we needed to build treatment for dioxane, because it is treatable for sure. And we do have some of the tools in our toolbox to do that. But it's my belief that we would never get to that point because the regulators would intervene. And with additional pump and treating, there would be options to create capture zones for the plume to prevent it from reaching Barton Pond.
Great. Okay. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your presentation.
Okay, Kathy, you have the floor. And then Lisa.
Yes, I've seen this presentation before, and I really appreciate all the effort that Brian and Glenn put into preparing it. Council agreed to refer this to the Environmental Commission, and I really appreciate Council's action there. But I have to remind everyone that democracy is about majority rules, minority rights. And this exercise is really about one unnamed council member driving this process. As a council member, I have no idea who that is. It's costing considerable staff resources and tax dollars to go through this process. Dan Bicknell and Professor Caruso both spoke with their concerns about the Great Lakes Water Authority. And I'm extremely troubled that whatever this process is similar to some of our other processes, like we spent almost a year arguing about whether a dual process, meaning the legal process and the EPA process, was viable when common sense told us and the EPA told us, yes, it was. So again, I just want to go on record saying I believe this is an undemocratic path and I'm deeply troubled. I appreciate that the Environmental Commission has the opportunity to weigh in. Thank you.
Lisa, and then Chris.
I just wanted to raise one more in response, actually, to Commissioner Callawart. When you asked about bring the water pipes across multiple municipalities. A different concern there with the GLWRA, I hope I don't know if I got the acronym right. Sorry, it's been a long day. Is precisely that we would really have to do a lot of piping. We'd be really far from the source, and the farther you pipe water, the more disinfectant you have to put into it, and so our water quality would be, well, I don't know if it's right to say not as good, but from what I understood from the presentation, Mr. Steglitz, and I'm hoping you'll jump in and make this mush of what I'm saying more clear and clean, is that we do much better to have our local treatment plant, because the farthest distance that we pipe from our own local water treatment plant is just minuscule compared to what it would have to be coming from the Great Lakes Water Authority. So anyway, so please throw that point back in, Mr. Steglitz.
Yes, so thank you for raising that. I mean, clearly distance is an issue for a lot of reasons. Energy is one of them, but the other is disinfectant. So, they'll be disinfecting the water, so when it reaches us, it would meet, criteria for delivery, but we would likely have to boost disinfectant. So there will be more disinfectant in the water just because of the journey that the water has to take to get from, the authority's plants 50 miles over to the city of Ann Arbor.
Chris, you have the floor, and then Rita.
I share the concern that Shannon brought up about a drought. I'm wondering, I think 85% or so of our water comes out of Barton Pond and 15% from the well field down by the airport. Could the production of that well field be expanded in a particular dry period?
Well, right now, we have, the issue is with conveying the water from the well field to the water treatment plant. That is the limitation. So we have some capital improvement plans in the future to augment that, which is upsizing WaterMaid and adding a pumping station between the well field and the plant in order to boost capacity. So those are two things that are currently planned that would help us double what we can currently get from the well field. And then there's some future projects looking at adding also additional wells. So we have a few things there. I would anticipate that we probably wouldn't be moving forward with adding additional well capacity unless we felt like there was something driving that, like climate change that demonstrated that we had, drought conditions and that we weren't able to meet the demands of the community. I can also tell you that when we did have we had a crisis with a major power outage in 2003. I think many of you maybe remember that, but the whole Eastern Seaboard lost power. In that case, the Detroit Water Authority they had issues with boil water notices in their systems because they didn't have backup power systems, and there were parts of their system that lost water. We were able to provide water to our customers through that whole event, but our plant was only rated to provide an average day demand during that time. So we were talking, were we going to need to issue water use restrictions and things like that? But interestingly enough, during a crisis situation, even in the heat of a very hot summer, people tend to self-regulate. So the demands dropped immediately, and we didn't have to issue any any water use advisories. And just because it's sort of naturally people use water in those certain situations just for essential uses. And I would anticipate during a drought condition that Ann Arbor people would probably self-regulate and that we would probably be able to manage it just because people would stop irrigating and only use it for essential services.
So the lead time for adding wells and the location of those are already determined and they're not long? That is to say, within a year or so?
It would take several years to site and install. We have ideas about some general areas where that in 2015, we looked at where groundwater existed, where we may be able to augment our current well system. But There's a regulatory process that we would have to go through to add additional wells, and I would anticipate it would be several years.
So I would guess if we got into trouble, it'd come faster than that. The other concern I have is the resiliency of our piping system. I've seen evidence of the Gulf Stream getting wobblier and wobblier. All the way back to the 1980s or early 90s, one of the impacts of climate change that was being talked about was that if the Gulf Stream slowed way down or ceased to flow, that the Northeast US and Europe would become much colder. And that would mean we would have much more serious winters. I see a lot of broken pipes in the winter in Ann Arbor. Are we really pressing as hard as we can on the weak links in our system to make them resilient to winter freezing?
We have a pretty aggressive capital improvement plan associated with our distribution system piping, and this is regardless of what alternative we make. Choose with our water supply. We're still going to be operating the same distribution system. And we are continuing to invest. There's challenges there. Some of them are financial, but there's also just community tolerance for tearing up roads, and we call it orange barrel fever in the summer. So we have been increasing the rate of water main replacement to closer approximate what we need to in order to stay on top of this need. But we're going to continue to have main breaks in the winter. That's not something that's going to be going away in the short term.
Well, so I both for stormwater and especially for sanitary sewer and our water system, for 100 years, Ann Arbor has been doing a wonderful job, and I certainly am not one that suggests we go to Detroit, except if that's the only alternative if we're in trouble about supply. And so I think you guys have been doing a wonderful job, and I don't mind paying the additional fees.
Thank you, Chris. Rita, you have the floor.
Thanks. I want to touch on on two items. One is cost to consumers, comparing the two sources. And one of my concerns that comes to mind with the Great Lakes Water Authority is the water shutoffs that we've heard about in Detroit. And since we would be the water would be coming to us from a long distance, what would be the risk to us for water shutoffs with respect to the cost of the service? Has there been an assessment of the cost to the users?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but I'll take a stab at it, and you can let me know if I'm off track.
Okay.
In terms of water shutoffs, that would be, if you're talking about shutoffs for things like non-payment for individual customers, we would still have complete control over that because we would still be operating and distributing water to our customers. We're just not going to be providing the supply. So when you're seeing those kinds of things in Detroit, that's really not this Great Lakes Water Authority. That's probably the municipal Detroit, DWSD, Detroit Water and Sewer, who is responsible for delivering water to customers in Detroit. So it's their policies and their implementation. So we would have complete control over that. In terms of the rates to our customers, right now I know that council is very familiar with. I'm not sure of the Environmental Commission with the rate structure we have, but this inclining block rate structure where users who use more water pay more per unit. We would still have to maintain control of the structure of our water fees to our customers. That wouldn't necessarily have to change. It would remain under the discretion of the city.
But
we would make sure that sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to wouldn't the cost per unit be greater because of the cost of developing this system? So if we're comparing 100 million versus the 300 million, it seems like that we would ultimately bear that higher cost as customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to the chart that we showed on our annual revenue requirements, Glenn, if you want to maybe jump back a couple of slides. This is the cost that it's going to cost the city to operate the system we anticipate if we were making this change now in fiscal year 22. So we're talking about, maybe 20, 25, 30% more cost revenue that the city is going to need in order to operate the system under a regional water supply alternative. So that 30% is going to be covered by our customers. Our water rates are going to have to cover that difference. How it's distributed amongst all of our customer classes is based on the rate structure we use. But if you assume it's distributed equally across the board, everyone will be paying that increase.
Okay, thanks. And the other question is a quality one about industrial pollutants that might be in addition to the kinds of things that you have listed on your one slide with the quality concerns. I understand that at least one of the intakes is in the Rouge River area. Is that correct?
That I'm not sure of.
Okay. All right.
I think there is more industry that has been raised by several people who have commented in around some of the Detroit intakes. So there is, a fair bit more industry. So you could interpret that as being an additional risk.
Okay. And does the water as supplied to, if it was to be supplied to us, what are the treatments that the Detroit system uses to extract those kinds of pollutants?
They have different treatment processes at each of their different treatment plants, so they're not all the same. I'm not familiar enough with the details of their treatment processes. I can tell you that the Great Lakes Water Authority is a very reputable authority that provides, great quality water to their customers. So I anticipate that they have, just like we do, a multi-barrier approach to drinking water quality, which means that they have several stages in their treatment process that would address the water quality that they see in their source waters and the potential risks. But if there were specific questions about what treatment processes they have to address certain things, that would be something we'd have to look into.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Rita. If any other commissioners have questions, please raise your hand, using the Zoom feature. Otherwise, I can't see you. If there are no more questions, I have a few. First one is people have asked about floods, about drought, but the flip side of that are floods. Well, the climate model suggested we'll be getting more intense and frequent rainfall. So I was wondering about because I assume that the water intake would be jeopardized if Barton Dam failed. And I was wondering what, my understanding is that the city is doing a great job of maintaining it. And this is really a black swan event type event. So I'm just wondering if that's been included in any of the contingency planning.
We spend a lot of time and resources to ensure that dam, Barton Dam, is maintained in proper condition and meets all of the safety guidelines. That's happened because we generate power there. It's regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and there are, as Glenn can attest to, because he's the person who's mainly responsible for ensuring that we're compliant at our dams. There are many things that we do to ensure that the integrity of the dams are maintained. We have, a whole capital project improvement plan in order to continue to maintain those. In terms of flows and being able to handle it, the dam is capable of handling a very, very large amount of water. We've been getting a lot of rains now, 4 inches. We haven't even scratched the surface on what that dam is capable of passing, and we haven't in its life. So I don't see the climate change risk being an issue for the dam to be able to maintain what flows we could see even with a very, very significant storm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's great. That's been my impression. So It's good to hear that. I just have one more question, and that is that during this whole discussion, I was surprised to not hear any mention of like a reverse osmosis option for water treatment. I guess this wasn't originally considered as part of that, but I'm just wondering what city staff has been doing to evaluate that kind of option.
So we've talked. Yeah, we've discussed we discussed it a little bit during the 2015 study, and our intention would be to address this as part of the future plant improvements, if that's the direction council would ask us to go to evaluate membrane processes. Reverse osmosis is one. There's other ones as well. The reality is that the cost of putting in reverse osmosis for a plant of our size, there's not. I don't know if there are any, and if there are, there are very few of that size in the country. It's just not really a cost-effective solution. There's also issues with the amount of reject water that process generates. And then what do we do with that? You can have, so in order to treat, for example, if we have a 50 million gallon capacity plant, which we do, and it's going through a reverse osmosis system, 25 to 30% of that is wasted in the process and has to be handled by a wastewater plant or discharged into the environment. We don't really have that opportunity in Ann Arbor. We couldn't put that back into the environment, and our wastewater plant, which is just renovated, doesn't have capacity to handle it. And it would derate our plant by about 25 to 30%. So a 50 MGD plant becomes a 35 to 37 million gallon per day plant, which gets very close to some of the highest flows that we've seen over the past 10 to 20 years. So if we were going with that technology, then the state would be asking us, what are you doing to expand the capacity of your plant to be able to address the fact that you're achieving over 90% of what your potential flows would be. So it raises a lot of questions, and it creates a lot more challenges. And I think we need to do a better job of explaining and completely evaluating it, but I don't anticipate that would be a solution that would be appropriate for Ann Arbor.
Okay. Yeah, it just came to my attention that the Brunswick County in North Carolina, because of the extensive Gen X contamination of the Cape Fear River, they've recently installed a reverse osmosis plant that I believe is rated at 35 gallons per day, 35 million gallons per day, and the capital costs for 170 million, at least what you can see on their website. I was just assuming that they ran the water directly back into the river.
It's possible. It's basically a concentrated brine, so it depends on what the environment is and whether the river has the capacity to absorb it. I would anticipate that we wouldn't be able to do that with the Huron because of the sensitivity of the ecosystem, but it would have to be more thoroughly evaluated. But it tends to be used as a last resort when there's no other options available, and we have the ability to treat our source waters with the current technologies we're using more cost effectively than reverse osmosis.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So Chris Graham has his hand up. Chris, you have the floor.
Last question. I've watched with considerable dismay over the last 20 years as the water weeds in Barton Pond have more or less stopped sailing entirely there, which was a big deal for 100 years. And I think I know that the Toledo water supply had the algae that was so toxic actually encrusting their intakes. Are you watching the developments of algae and weeds in Barton Pond really closely and have plans in place to deal with anything toxic that might erupt out there?
Yes, we're regularly monitoring the water quality, and we also look at it over time to see how the watershed is transitioning. So yeah, it's something that's definitely on our radar. We don't have a harmful algal bloom issue along the Huron at this point in time. We do have a algal toxin response plan in place, so we know what we would do if we were going to run into a situation like that. But it's not something that we have experience, and at this point, we don't see that being a current risk in the Huron.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I don't see any. So thank you very much, Glenn and Brian, for presenting to us. In about 45 minutes, we're going to discuss a resolution that's been posted on Legistar. And it'll be a first reading only, I believe. So if you care to hang on and answer any questions that might happen at that point, that might be useful, or we could defer that to another meeting in October, probably. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this evening.
Lisa has her hand up. Lisa Dish.
I'm just wondering, I imagine that Mr. Steglitz might have other things to do. So I wonder if we could pose a couple of, I guess there were 3 resolved clauses at the end that might benefit from feedback from him. I wonder if we could just, I don't know if this is allowed in the order of meetings, but if we could pose those questions to him and just ask for his thoughts. I mean, he hasn't had a chance to deliberate over it, but I mean,
yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, yeah.
Or we could deal with the resolution now.
Yeah, we could deal with it now. Okay, we'll have to move it up in the agenda. Kathy, that's her hand up.
I move to open the agenda and move the resolution to directly behind this discussion.
Is there a second?
Second, with great gratitude.
All who agree, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, it looks unanimous. So let's move it up. I can share my screen, and I have the resolution up here. So okay. So I have it up. Can everybody see it? Okay. So I guess I should read through the whole thing. So whereas the city of Ann Arbor has scheduled needed upgrades to the municipal water infrastructure and the capital improvement plan, projecting, my understanding is this a 50-year service life? Is that correct? And whereas 4 scenarios for city water infrastructure were investigated and reported by Black & Veatch in 2015 and include detailed financials and risk-benefit analyses. Whereas city staff and several consultants under contract have since updated and refined the cost-benefit analyses, focusing on 2 alternatives of the 4, either rehabilitate the current facility at the same site and continue using the existing water intakes, or contract with the Great Lakes Water Authority to deliver processed drinking water to Ann Arbor for further processing and distribution. Whereas risk benefit and capital cost comparisons clearly favor rehabilitation, I think is the proper word, of the current facility, which was about $108 million in 2021 dollars, rather than switching to GLRWA, delivered source water, which was projected to cost about $355 million in 2021 dollars. Whereas the operating cost comparisons are also projected to be 30% to 100% higher if source water is switched to GLWA. I think that's wrong because I think they're estimated to be about equal, is my understanding now. Is that correct? Mr. Steglitz, or?
I would say operating cost comparisons are projected to be higher for if source water is switched to the Great Lakes Water Authority. I think we have a difficult to identify how much, but we expect it to be higher.
Yeah, I got those numbers out of that projected operating costs, but they would be 30%, potentially 100% higher. Okay. And whereas long-term risks to water quality are not under the control of the city of Ann Arbor, but reside in state and federal regulatory agencies, I believe what I'm speaking to here is that EGLA and the state and the federal entities are responsible for water quality, and the city has very little control of water quality, which would be an issue for both options. However, I would think that Ann Arbor might have more through working through the Huron River Watershed Council and other municipalities in the watershed. We might have more control over it than we would have if the intake was in the Detroit River, which is an international boundary as well.
One edit I might make to that is I might add source in front of water quality, because we do have control over our finished water quality. It's the source water quality where we don't have.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Thank you for that correction. Yeah. Whereas risks to intake water quality are anticipated to be less likely and more manageable for the Huron River rather than the Detroit River. I know that the Black and Beach analysis indicated that there was more risk with the Huron River, but in terms of catastrophic events, I would think that there are more problems with the Detroit River, given that the water treatment plant is upstream of the water intake at Fighting Island, and there's also another intake upstream, just upstream of Bell Island. Where I imagine there was some. I know there was some discussion of this in the Black and Beach report, that if there were a catastrophic spill in Sarnia, which is a major petrochemical site in Canada, just upstream. And then we have the Rouge River and the Clinton River, and we have the industrial facilities down there at the foot of the Rouge River. So I'm not sure how strongly to express this concern, but I think it seems to me to be more manageable, partly because the Huron River is a smaller watershed compared to the Detroit River, and it is relatively free of industrial development, and it's not an international boundary. So I'm not sure whether it's appropriate to keep that or not, but we can work on these whereas clauses. We could refine these later. Are there any comments so far? Raise your hand. No, I don't see any concerns here. Rita Mitchell raised her hand. Rita.
I did. I just want to mention that we received a comment from the Ann Arbor Township supervisor in support of continuing with the source from the Huron River. And I think that that's significant, because you could say that our water processing is not just for the city of Ann Arbor, but also for another township, since they source their water from us.
Two or three others.
Three? Thank you.
I know there's, yeah, I believe their board passed a resolution.
Yeah.
A few days ago. So it's not just the supervisor, but the board passed a resolution in support of option one.
Yeah, and that was sent to us prior to this meeting.
Mm-hmm. So, and whereas the Ann Arbor Department of Water Services has been acknowledged as one of the best in the state of Michigan, traditionally being proactive in monitoring potential threats such as PFAS, parasitic microorganisms, and responding with timely improvements in treatment technologies. Whereas the superior quality of Ann Arbor municipal water has been acknowledged over many years, staff has nourished a culture of transparency and responsiveness to customer concerns. Whereas water is a public good, and proactive local management of water quality based on routine, ongoing scientific testing is a public benefit valued by the community. Be it resolved that these are the clauses that were drafted. There are four of them. The first one is the Environmental Commission advises Ann Arbor City Council to proceed with rehabilitation of the water treatment facility at the current site in Ann Arbor and continue to use Huron River water and local groundwater wells as the source of Ann Arbor water. So let's have a discussion clause by clause. So if you have a comment, please raise your hand. Lisa Dish.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we could maybe just whip through them for Mr. Steglitz to comment, and then we could discuss them in a painstaking way, but maybe we just want to let him, because that clause seems pretty uncontroversial. Council's going to do everything in our discussion has pointed to this, but the further resolved clauses, I think, are things that I would like to hear Mr. Steglitz's, and again, could just this by him later. I also don't want to help the RAA folks, but while we had Mr. Steglitz here, I thought it might be interesting to show him the resolved clauses that seem to be asking further action.
Oh, that's good. Brian, Mr. Steglitz, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, that helps. So the second resolved clause is that the Environmental Commission advises Ann Arbor City Council to direct the city administrator to continue to monitor and take actions to improve the health of the Huron River through coordination with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Washtenaw County, particularly Water Resources Commissioner, and the Huron River Watershed Council. And I should add other government entities within the Huron River watershed, potentially. What would be your comment on that clause?
I'm struggling with some of the things that really are not part of our responsibilities to some degree are not to improve the health of the Huron River. While we support that, directing staff to take actions to improve the health of the Huron is probably not really within our scope of our capabilities. I don't have an issue with it, but I feel like it doesn't have a lot of meaning.
No, I believe you're correct. So I think before our next meeting, I think it would be important to discuss this issue.
And one way, the monitoring portion, I don't have an issue with. Maybe instead of take action is maybe advocate for the maintaining quality and of something like that.
Yeah, I like
where we're advocating on behalf of improving the quality of our source waters.
Mm-hmm. And who upstream of us do you think has the power to help with that?
Well, this is a really great place for the Huron River Watershed Council, right? Because this is their thing. This is what they do. Is they go across jurisdictions and they can help the advocacy. They have the connections with the upstream entities. So in partnership with them, and we meet with them and we coordinate regularly. So it would be leveraging that relationship to improve the health of the Huron.
Okay. Alrighty, so I'll read the modified one, that the Environmental Commission advises Ann Arbor City Council to direct the city administrator to direct staff to continue to monitor and advocate to improve the health of the Huron River through coordination with Eagle, Washtenaw County, and the Huron River Watershed Council. Is there any, Chris Graham, you have your hand up about this clause?
Not this one. There are a couple I'd like to add and comment later on other ones.
Okay, you don't have a comment right now?
No, advocating for the protection and improving water quality in the river is great.
Okay. All right, thank you. Kathy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I don't think we need to direct staff. I think that's redundant. If we just direct the city administrator, he will make it happen. And he's made comments to that effect at recent council meetings. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned other local governmental entities, and I would like to add that phrase in because we work very closely with Scioto Township, Ann Arbor Township, and maybe that's it. In Washtenaw County, yeah, it's already there. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Okay. We'll leave that as it is now. And then the third clause, I'll read it. Resolved that the Environmental Commission advises Ann Arbor City Council to consider, well, this is a bit convoluted, to instruct staff to post contingency plans for potential sudden interruption of municipal water services on the city's website. I think it would be a good idea to, I looked on the city's website and I could not find any posting for that. So that if anybody, any resident of the city had a question, that there would be a place where they could just see what the current contingency plans were. It's a relatively minor point, but Kathy, you have your hand up, and then Chris.
I don't disagree with it, but I don't know if it belongs in the resolution as opposed to just a memo or phone call to the city administrator offering recommendations for improving the website.
Yeah.
But I'll defer to Brian if he thinks it's needed. I think it's a little too prescriptive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure. I don't see how this belongs in the conversation about what we're discussing. This is sort of a separate issue. Mm-hmm. And I would want to, understand what the commission and maybe council thinks is missing and is needed. I mean, we have pretty robust emergency response plans, and in certain cases, for very specific reasons, we don't make components of them public. So there are, security components of some of our plans that for a variety of reasons, we keep in-house. So there may be things that we could post that would maybe meet some of the needs, but it wouldn't be my intention to post our contingency plans and make them publicly available.
No, I understand there are homeland security concerns about that. Okay. Well, I'm going to delete that clause then. Chris, you have your hand up.
Well, I was going to suggest a little bit alternate thrust of the clause, and that's to make sure that we have contingency plans in place that can be promptly put into place for low flow conditions in the river.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other comments about that suggestion?
A drought circumstance might happen a whole lot faster than 2 or 3 years.
I support it, but I don't think it belongs in this resolution.
Wherever.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris, you seem to be.
We have drought contingency plans in place currently, so they don't need to be developed.
Okay.
Okay. Kathy, you still have your hand up.
I would recommend deleting the final resolve clause as well. I think some of that's already in place and it's not related to the resolution.
You're right. It's a minor point. It was there I put it in there as a place saver or a reminder. All right. So I think it will delete. I'm thinking of deleting these last 2 resolve clauses because they really don't fit into the scope of this resolution. And and these would be just a relatively minor request to city staff. Chris, you have your hand up.
So again, I don't know that it belongs here, but the city is increasingly inspecting backflow valves on irrigation systems about every 2 years when they know about them. Included in that process ought to be that there should be an operating rain sensor on every irrigation system that's inspected. Many irrigation systems don't have them and run merrily along when it's been pouring rain. Maybe it doesn't belong here, but it would help.
Okay. No, that's an excellent idea. But I think that's another excellent idea, but I don't think it's within the scope of this resolution, which is about the water source.
Put it in the hopper.
Let's bring that up at a future meeting, okay?
Well, somehow. I don't know where the regulation comes from to inspect backflow valves. So wherever that comes from, this could be added.
This could be another change to the UDC, I guess. Okay. Well, I'm going to delete these.
So the city I'll just quickly, the city does have a cross connection control plan, and that's all part of it. What Commissioner Graham was just describing. So you could inquire about what the city's plan entails and what frequency we're doing some of that. I know some of the issue has been, we are doing what the state requires, but the city could be directed to do more, some of the things that were just mentioned. And I think that really becomes a funding issue, and whether we have the current resources in place to execute a more robust cross connection and, looking at the things that the commissioner just mentioned. So it would be, I think it's resource limited is really the challenge. But if it was something that council directed the city to implement, then we would have to build that into future budgets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I wasn't planning on a vote on this right now. I thought we would have a vote at our next meeting after some consideration. So, Kathy, you have your hand up.
Two things. One is I support what Chris said, and I would be willing to work on a resolution if needed. I just want to point out that the city had to replace about 40 feet of blacktop multi-use path in front of Walgreens that was due to over irrigation and a faulty sprinkler head. And so it was the path was just washed out. So it would save us money in the long run as well. And then I'd like to move that we consider this resolution tonight, because the sooner the council acts, the sooner we can minimize the amount of time staff has spent working on this separate path with Great Lakes Water Authority that does not seem to have any support from community experts or the surrounding community.
Okay. All right. I'm prepared to have a vote if there are the motions, if the motions come up. I think I should delete. Should I delete these reference documents and links at the beginning here? This is unusual, I think, for other resolutions that I've seen the city commissions and the council pass as well.
Put them in.
But I'm happy. I think it's important to keep these kind of information resources in there.
You can put them at the end, Steve.
Okay.
Sometimes.
I would move passage of the resolution subject to editing by Steve in accordance with the comments made this evening, and let's proceed.
Second.
Second, all who
Can I?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can just make a quick comment on the second resolved clause before you. I mean, if we have an opportunity maybe to think about this a little, but I think it would be clearer. Can you just scroll down to the second resolved clause?
The second resolved clause. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think it would be clearer direction for staff if it said to continue to monitor and advocate for source water protection to ensure the Huron River remains a suitable source of drinking water for the Ann Arbor community, something like that.
Yeah, very good.
Let's see. To continue to monitor and advocate for source water quality.
Advocate for source water protection to ensure the Huron River can continue to be what did I say? I don't even remember, but source water protection to ensure the Huron River can serve as an adequate supply of drinking water for the city of Ann Arbor in the future, or for the next several generations. I don't know, something like that.
Okay.
But I think the source water protection piece is sort of important.
Mm-hmm. To advocate for source water protection to ensure the health of the Huron River for future generations, or?
I got it. I'll send it to you in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm tired.
Call the question.
Sorry?
Call the question.
Okay. I'm calling the question.
Thank you.
let's see. I can't see this since I'm sharing the screen. So let's see, Lisa, your language, you want to just read it to me?
And I just send it to you by email. I noticed chat, so I'll just send it to you to save time.
Okay, but I don't think I
Yeah,
can.
I'll just.
do it.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it now.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we'll wordsmith that to make it more appropriate. Okay, based on Lisa's suggestion. Okay, so do I have a motion to vote on Chris's suggestion amendment?
I think you got a motion and a second.
And a second. All right. All who say aye, raise your hands or say aye.
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 Okay. Any objections? Any noes? Hearing and seeing none. Any abstentions? All right.
A Twilight Zone.
Yeah. So all right. So this resolution passes unanimously. I will write this up and email it the commissioners early tomorrow morning by noon tomorrow. And if it's appropriate, I'll ask Galen to forward it to the city clerk. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Brian and Glenn.
Thank
for
you.
participating in this commission meeting.
Thank you.
And so we'll move on to the Recycle Ann Arbor presentation. So we have two separate presentations here. So let's see, as we have it loaded. Brian Buchanan, are you still on the meeting?
Good evening. How's everyone doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great, great. Thanks for having me, Steve, and environmental commissioners. I wanted to just update you on a few things that we talked about at the last time I presented at the Environmental Commission meeting, and some pretty exciting things happening in the community that I think are important for you to be aware of. But first, Brian Buchanan, I'm CEO of Recycle Ann Arbor, a nonprofit mission-based organization. Or 4 Brians at REA, and I'm one of them. Just briefly, you're all reading about the climate crisis and the related events, historic flooding, heat waves, wildfires, the things that you were discussing earlier that really do impact a lot of the infrastructure. So right now is a perfect time and never been more important time to act on these climate crisis issues. And I think general public and most people are aware of the issues and want to act on them on a local level. Just some locals, a couple local statistics. The Ann Arbor area has seen almost a 42% increase in extreme weather events. And you heard the previous presentation talking about that over the last 60 years. That's mind-boggling. But building zero waste systems will empower our community to act locally on those climate issues. So these things keep happening to us. What can we do on a local level? And so that's what I'd like to talk about is some of the zero waste building blocks that are going to help us act on a local level on some of these global issues. And just to the importance of zero waste, you guys have all, I think, read the A20 carbon neutrality report, and it talks about the impact of waste. But if you look at the carbon emission statistics from a zero waste perspective and from a materials life cycle analysis, it's clear that waste contributes 42% of the carbon emissions, not the 3% that shows up in other reports. So it's a significant issue, and it's something we can all work on a local level. It's something we can do. So, forward looking and thinking progressive communities like Ann Arbor, we can really lead in this zero waste movement. And it is a movement. This is happening not just in Michigan, not just in the United States, but around the world. And it's a significant movement. So it's something that we can do locally, and we as leaders of the more progressive communities in Michigan can really have a huge impact. Be surprised how impactful examples are and demonstrations are. So had three things I wanted to talk about. There are many things that Recycle Ann Arbor and the city's working on, but three I wanted to mention. Talk a little bit more about. Firstly, the eco site. Recycle Ann Arbor just purchased 17 acres and is currently we're planning the future for our future zero waste demonstrations for the site, and I'll talk a little bit more about what the eco site is and some of the opportunities there. We're also building the zero waste materials recovery facility. Steve asked me to definitely mention and update the group on the materials recovery facility. Things are going well. I want to talk a little bit about that. But the idea, what's a zero waste materials recovery facility versus the old materials recovery facility? And it's, they look similar, but the principle is the highest value and best use of the material and that's being generated. So highest and best use. Transparent, credible recycling. We've gotten away from that in the recycling industry, and I want to talk more about transparent, credible recycling and the impacts that can have. And then we've got this pile of stuff right on Platt Street, but really looking upstream of that pile and looking downstream of that pile. So downstream, where's the stuff going? What is it getting made into? How recyclable is it? And then looking upstream, hey, what's coming at us? Sometimes we tend to just stare at the tailpipe and it's just coming at us. So really crawling up that tailpipe or looking at the source of that material and starting to influence the source of that material. Those are really components that make a zero waste materials recovery facility. And then the last thing I want to talk about is an organization that's been formed in the last year that Recycle Ann Arbor was a founding member of, Arbor, the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers, that and talk a little bit about some national and international policy that's going on that we're part of. So I think the last 18 months have really shown that global supply chains are easily disrupted. And we rely heavily on single-use packaging. I think those two things have become really, we've become really aware of them through the pandemic. And so REA is connecting that local circular supply chain by using this eco site to really incubate and house zero waste infrastructure. And that's, what does that mean? Creating that infrastructure, what would that look like? So refillables is a good possibility and definitely ripe in the Ann Arbor area. Reuse, you saw during the pandemic we had to shutter our reuse center, but reuse, it comes in a number of different forms. So what does that look like in the future? And recycling businesses, but all of them that address waste at the source instead of at the tailpipe. So we're really looking at the source of where that stuff comes from, influencing the brands and the manufacturers, and then creating demonstrations here in Ann Arbor that can actually address that issue and create a more sustainable future. So that's kind of the idea of the eco site. We received a couple of grants, two $10,000 grants to begin the planning of what this site will look like. This is the site on Jackson Road where the construction demolition site, the recovery yard currently sits, where construction demolition material gets recycled, and then what can be recycled. So it sits on that site. There's an additional 17 acres there that we're really excited about creating this visionary eco site. Secondary is the materials recovery facility. I spoke last time we met about the materials recovery facility. REA invests about $7 million in basically taking all that old equipment out of that existing building that sits on Platt, the 4150 Platt Road. So we took all the old equipment out, or most of the old equipment out, and replaced it with new state-of-the-art materials recovery facility equipment. And if you'll remember, we signed the contract, the 10-year contract with the city to reconstruct that facility, remanufacture that facility, and then process the city's recyclables. And so we signed the contract in November, and then we've been doing the construction, the demolition, and recycling. We've recycled over 100 tons of that scrap equipment, and replacing it with new state-of-the-art optic sorters and new equipment. And we'll actually be starting what they call wet commissioning, which is basically where you start putting material on the line and sorting through that material, doing stress tests, ramping it up to its capacity, and which is about 18 to 20 tons per hour is what the facility will operate at. And the materials recovery facility, as you know, it brings the recyclables from all the community, from all of Ann Arbor, to the facility, and then sorts that material out, either by people or by machines or other technology. So that's scheduled to open November 1st and begin processing. So as I mentioned, we're doing the wet commissioning. We start that on October 11th, where we fire the equipment up and start operating it, start doing stress tests and those kinds of things. And we will be operational as planned by November 1st. Quite a feat during the pandemic with all of the metal shortages and all the supply chain issues. So we feel we're really excited about that. There's a shakeout period up to November, but then when we're actually operational, there'll be what they call shakeout, which is where you operate for a period of time until you get sort of the kinks worked out. So look in the spring around Earth Day. That might be a good time to think about ribbon cuttings, that kind of thing, so the community can be more involved. But facilities being built, it's on schedule. It's looking good. All indications are that we'll start the first week in November. If you set your recyclables out at the curb, they'll get processed locally, and you know where they're going to go, and you know what they're going to get made into. The principles of the materials recovery facility, as I mentioned, highest and best use of the material. What does that mean? First of all, what comes in? The higher the quality of material that comes in, the higher quality of material that goes out. A lot of cleanup requires a lot of money and does dirty the other material. So I guess from an education standpoint, when in doubt, please leave it out at this point until you're feeling comfortable that it is actually a recyclable item. But the idea is highest and best use is not just how we treat the people who are processing that material, not just how we treat that material as we collect it and bring it in, not just how well we process it and how we think about residue and try to capture as much of what comes in as we can and recycle it. But then when we bale it up and we send it to markets, what happens? What are those markets? Where does it get sent? What does it get recycled into? And how can that be recycled again and again? If we make it into a low value mixed plastic product that can't be recycled again, we're still on that linear path where that material isn't used in a sustainable way. So how can we recycle that where it gets recycled again and again? Because that's the real value of recycling, and that's where circularity and real sustainability comes from. So highest and best use of that material. Like I said, living wage jobs, good benefits. People can raise their families on those kind of jobs. Good path to the future. But then transparent, credible recycling. So, you know, a lot of people hear and read, and there's a lot of articles out there, New York Times, a number of them, that sort of indicate that recycling is broken, that, hey, my community isn't recycling, it's going to the landfill. Well, that goes to credibility and transparency. Let people see it gets recycled here in our community. Where does it go? We're going to let you know where it goes and what it gets made into. So it's a real process, and that there are good reasons for people feeling like recycling isn't as credible as it should be. So really doing it on a local level. The city's determined they want to do it with a local nonprofit recycler like Recycle Ann Arbor, and that just lends more credibility and to the process. And like I mentioned, we take it very seriously. If we accept an item for recycling, we're going to do our best to recycle it. We're not going to greenwash the recycling. And also, I think, again, the transparency and credibility is targeted zero waste education. I really think a lot of you know that education is key. It's not just recycling. It's not just about what's recyclable and what's not recyclable, but what's the benefit of recycling. People, I think, sometimes just say recycling, check, done. Now I'm on to my next sustainability thing. I'm going to get a solar panel for my roof or buy an electric car or something like that. But really recycle, more people recycle than vote. Obviously, it's something that people do on an everyday basis. And they want to know that, and the reason that they're recycling is that they want to know that it's being done sort of right, and that the most environmental benefit is being brought to it. So targeted zero waste education. We're not going to tell you something's recyclable if it's not. And that may feel a little disingenuous to some people, and they may think, oh man, I can't put as much stuff in my recycling bin. But the thing is, you know what you put in the bin, and you know what we tell you is recyclable. And we know because we've conducted our due diligence, and we know it's a credible source where that material is going, what's getting made into. And then watchdogging the industry. Everybody knows that, or everyone's probably seen, people put the chasing arrows, the triangle recycling emblem on a lot of things that aren't necessarily recyclable. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But truth in advertising is important, and truth in recycling is even more important right now. So really watchdogging the industry and sort of calling it out as it becomes apparent that it's not authentic. And then, as I mentioned, the upstream and the downstream of it. Looking upstream, being able to, the materials recovery facilities, it's a little bit like a laboratory. We kind of get it all in, from the curbside bin. We can feed back to those brand names. We can feed back to those manufacturers and say, hey, your material, your fancy packaging that you just generated, it doesn't run through our facility and it gums up the works. Or, boy, this is very recyclable item. Thank you very much. So being that feedback loop for the manufacturers and the brands is another big part of the materials recovery facility. So looking upstream and then downstream, like I said, highest and best use for the material that gets generated. Then the last thing I want to talk about is the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers. So recycling's gone through many iterations, and so a lot of you will remember how Recycle Ann Arbor's program got started. It was a lot of young guys with ponytails hanging off the back of flatbed trucks, picking up newspapers and that type of thing. So it came from a place of genuinely wanting to make sure that the material gets recycled. And there were mostly nonprofits that started a lot of the recycling infrastructure way back in the actually late 60s, early 70s, all the way until about the 1980s when the multinationals, the municipalities had taken it over, and the multinationals were just getting into recycling, and just sort of saw it as a logistical issue of, am I picking up garbage? Am I picking up recycling? And it was just became this sort of function of logistics. So these group of mission-based recyclers, they've seen that whole arc, they've seen that whole curve, and they've been advocating for the same things through every iteration of the recycling industry, and that's to rebuild credible, transparent, and just recycling systems. There's a lot of justice issues in waste and incineration and landfills and recycling. So it's not just about where you get the best price for material, but there are other issues with that too. So the Amber members, and just for your information, they're 4 founding members, and Recycle Ann Arbor is one of them. Another one is Eureka Recycling in Minneapolis, EcoCycle in Boulder, Colorado, the Ecology Center in Berkeley, California, and then Recycle Ann Arbor here. And we are bound together and committed to the goals of rebuilding credible, transparent recycling, strengthening state and national policy. All of these organizations have been very involved in policy. They're not just recyclers with trucks. These people they understand the entire industry and are very involved in local, state, and national policy issues, as is Recycle Ann Arbor. And then one of the major goals is actually to reduce plastic consumption. And this is where you see a lot of information on media about doing away with plastics. Plastics play a role. If an entity is saying it's a recyclable item, we want to make sure that that recycling is available, that it's authentically being recycled. So we want to improve that plastic recycling infrastructure. So we're not all or nothing. We're improving recycling infrastructure, plastic recycling infrastructure where we can, and then reducing that consumption where that material isn't recyclable, necessary, needed. And then raising the standards for recycling operations, as I mentioned. Fair living wage jobs, good benefits, good working conditions, safe, for collections and processing. So that's kind of what Amber represents. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the policy that we're kind of seeing the fruits of the labor of Amber and many other groups. There's a renaissance happening around recycling policy and zero waste policy, and has been for the last several years. The fruit of that sort of show both coasts, Maine and California, sort of two coasts, but two zero waste issues that are very important. So the first is the state of Maine passed the first extended producer responsibility legislation in the nation. And so you have a sense, extended producer responsibility is an effort to hold the producer of packaging waste responsible instead of the cities, which is the way it works now. The city is paying for those recycling services, and us through the citizens through paying their taxes and that. And recycling organizations, that's who's been responsible in the past. Now there's a very substantial movement to make those producers accountable to the products that they're creating. I mean, they're amazing packaging products that are doing amazing things, but we have to look at the tail end of that and how that's impacting us overall, and they need to be participating in the handling of that material that they're creating. So that's what it is creating that partnership among brands and manufacturers with recycling entities and cities and states to share that responsibility and to cover those costs, because those costs need to be borne by someone. But the state of Maine, the first extended producer responsibility legislation in the nation, it will hold packaging manufacturers responsible for the waste they produce. So if you sell a cardboard box in Maine, you're responsible to share in the cost and the recycling. of that product. And what that does is drives the manufacturer to account for, to think about that in their design, so that they are designing for recyclability, so that their costs can be reduced. And so this is really common in other countries, in the EU countries and things like that. And Canada has had producer responsibility for a number of years. So this is the first extended producer responsibility bill we're seeing in the U.S. And it's actually an authentic extended producer responsibility legislation that we're really excited about. On the other coast, California, I talked about truth in recycling, that triangle chasing arrows with the little number that you can't really see in the middle of it. That doesn't denote that it's recyclable. It never did. It was very confusing for the general public. So the state of California is tackling that misleading chasing arrow plastic numbering system. It confuses. I can't tell you how many thousand calls we get each year about confusion around that very issue. So what you can see is California is a huge economy, and so the packaging that comes into California, and therefore the packaging that leaves California, is going to have to be rebranded and changed. And there has to be more truth, whether that product is truly recyclable or not. And that's going to impact the rest of the country. You've seen that with a number of other things that California has done. So this truth in recycling is something that I think everybody is really excited about, and I think it's going to impact us all. So that's some really nice legislation that's happening on both the coasts. Here in Michigan, just so you know, all of these things Arbor is involved in, and Recycle Ann Arbor is involved in. So that, you know, the idea is for Recycle Ann Arbor to really connect citizens and the community of Ann Arbor to local, national, state, national, and international policy. And we work closely with Break Free from Plastics and a number of other international groups, and then a number of national groups, so that our voice is heard in Ann Arbor. Something that's happening here in Michigan, we're in a really good place. And I think some people tend to discount the value of our redemption bill. We've had some people call it a bottle bill, but it's where you take your carbonated containers that are empty back to your grocery store, that redemption law. That's been in place for a number of years, over 20 years. And there's only 10 states in the country that have that in place. And this chart shows the impact that has. When there's a redemption law, a bottle bill in place, you get 62% recycling rate on your soda pop bottles and that type of thing in bottle bill states versus 28% recycling rate in non-bottle bill states. Glass bottles, 64% for bottle bill, 40% for non-bottle bill states. And then aluminum cans, probably the most impressive, 77% recycling rate versus 46% in non-bottle bill states. So really the idea of this new legislation, I don't know how good a chance it has of passing. I think with the current legislature, it may not have a good chance this session. But what it would do is also include, so right now the legislation in the bottle bill only includes carbonated beverages. And this would actually open it up to non-carbonated. If you can imagine the water bottle issue that everybody talks about, the disposable water bottles, this bottle bill doesn't currently address that. If we went to a non-carbonated bottle bill to include that, you can see how those numbers would greatly increase for bottle recycling too. So a number of different things happening on a national level, on a local level, and on a state level, and just wanted to make you aware of those. I wanted to just sort of sum up by talking a little bit, just a minute or two, about what we can do as the Environmental Commission, as Recycle Ann Arbor, as citizens. This may sound trite, but being a champion is really important. Not just a recycling champion, but a zero waste champion. And what does it mean to be a recycling champion versus a zero waste champion. But it's so impactful to your neighbors and to the community. Staying informed, super important as this stuff just changes literally day to day. So staying informed and engaged. Really, we need local support of these projects. So many of these projects that I'm talking about they're ready to take off. They just need to be resourced in a sustainable way, and they will take off. There is tremendous energy in our community to get some of these issues implemented, and really community-wide zero waste education and programs is where people have the most energy. So yeah, they're definitely interested in carbon neutrality. This is a way for them to demonstrate this in a very real way. So helping us fund those programs, helping us support those programs, but most importantly, and a big gap that we have in Ann Arbor over other communities I've worked in, is that we need ongoing investment in zero waste education and infrastructure. We don't currently, the city hasn't been able to get a contract in place for K through 12 education in the schools. So there's really nothing formalized there that's happening. Both of the invitation to bid and the RFP for the materials recovery facility and the collections didn't include any resources for education. So that's a gap we have that we need to work on trying to get in place. So I appreciate your time. I think I went just a little bit long, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them or email them to you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Lisa Dish has her hand up.
Yeah, this is so exciting. Thank you. What is your timeline on the eco site and on the extended producer responsibility bill? I guess your remarks about the bottle bill being expansion not being likely to pass, I can imagine that it would be hard to pass something like that in Michigan now with the current legislature. But how many states would we need to get those bills passed for it would just be that all producers just had to do it throughout the nation because their markets would be all messed up? So should we be advocating, I don't know, in other states, in California certainly, to get that moving?
Yeah, that's these projects, when they happen on a state by state level, it really drives the manufacturers and the producers crazy, because they have to create different systems in Oregon than they do in California than they do in Michigan. So it sort of reaches this tipping point. I don't know what the number of states is before it reaches that tipping point. I can tell you I've been doing this 30-something years now, and I've never seen as much momentum for extended producer responsibility. We have Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Procter & Gamble, all of the major bottlers, every single one of the major bottlers coming out and saying, yep, we need extended producer responsibility in some form. I have never seen that in my entire career. And honestly, I never thought I would, but they're all seeing the writing on the wall. Their service delivery method is single serve packaging, and they will do anything. They will do anything to keep that in place. And so I think it reaches a tipping point. I don't know what the number of states is, but yeah, I think what's really nice about Michigan is we already have the redemption in place with so it makes it easier to implement an extended producer responsibility model in Michigan. And I think there's interest among the manufacturers and bottlers to actually get something in place that'll be successful. And I think Michigan has a really good chance as far as extended producer responsibility. As far as expanding the bottle bill, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the current legislature. I don't think it's the moment. The momentum is definitely in favor of expanding the bottle bill, but not in the legislature. It's among people, and I think we're seeing the the fruits of our labor with manufacturers and bottlers saying, yep, I'm on board. We need to extend it. So we're looking at a number of where this legislation is in Michigan is there's a number of different options that they're looking at, whether we set up depots, and because the grocers are they're growing tired of having to deal with this stuff. They're not recyclers. Every square inch they've got is valuable to them. So how exactly it looks might not be exactly like it currently looks. So there's a number of discussions. I'll be speaking with Tamra next week. I stay in touch with Amcor. We stay in touch with the big manufacturers and the big players in the issue. So we'll see how it moves. But it feels like with the different legislature, we really have some serious momentum. I forgot the other question that you asked, Lisa. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're the eco site, the timeline.
Right. So we purchased the property late last year, I think December of last year. We got the two grants, a state grant and a county grant to do the planning. So that's the gap analysis of the land and the project. So we're trying to get clear on what our vision is so that we're really focused on what we implement in the eco site, and that's the thing that takes probably the most time. So we're looking at probably the end of next year having that focus and being ready to start implementing. Our first step is to move our headquarters, to move Recycle Ann Arbor's headquarters out to the eco site, and that'll happen late 22, early 23. That'll be the first step. Probably the actual implementation of the ecosite will happen over a number of years.
Are there other questions? Young Wen, and then Chris.
Yeah, I just have a question on how you include diversity, equity, and inclusion in recycling. Because I know like communities who don't speak English, or like they probably also earn minimum wages or like low income in the country. And I feel like for information important like recycling and composting is really useful to include languages that's other than English. And I was looking at the Recycling Ann Arbor website and saw the drop-off station and the other, I forgot the other station.
The recovery yard, probably.
Yeah. Yes, the recovery yard. And then I saw the two PDF of what can be recycled and what can't be recycled. And those had a really good information, but I think those information can be easily translated into different languages and posted on the website for people to access. Because
it's so important. And we're just so far, I think we haven't translated even into one language. What the plan right now is to move it over to 3 languages by the end of next year, and then a total of 12 languages when we're completely finished. But it's an issue of timing, and we're doing what we can do, but we need to do some work in that area. You're absolutely right. And diversity inclusion, that's where it starts, is a basic understanding of who your customer is and being able to speak to them and understanding that culture. And I've been here 3 years. We're doing our best to create fertile ground to include, to make sure diversity and inclusion are included. But I will say we're behind the curve. We need to do some work in that area.
I see. Is it possible that you guys like offer volunteering opportunities for volunteers to like translate the material for you guys? Yeah,
we were using a service that does it, and they got the messaging off quite a bit. So we had to quit doing it. But yeah, we could use people, actual translators that understand what we're trying to do. And they aren't like, it isn't like a computer generated thing, that there's actual contextual, cultural considerations. We could sure use that help.
Yeah. And earlier I was making a presentation on recycling composting for my parents because they don't know much about it. And I translated all 2 of the recycling drop-off station and recovery yard PDFs. I can definitely send them to you if you want to include them on your
Thank
website.
you. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll let Erica, who's our communications person, know that you've done that and that there may be some interest there, and she'll reach out to you. I'm assuming your contact information's on the Environmental Commission website.
Yes.
Okay.
All
right.
I don't think my email is on there, but if you can send me your email later, I can
do that. I could do that.
Okay, I'll get you all in touch.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Chris, you have the floor.
Brian, so what happens to the drop-off center out on Platt and Ellsworth in your new plans and your new properties?
Yeah. So the city wrote a grant to take a look at moving the drop-off station, and they partnered with the county. So Washtenaw County and the city of Ann Arbor wrote a grant to the state to look at relocating that, because you guys that have been out there probably know it kind of looks like the Tilton Hilton with the old building that's out there, and it's not going to last too much longer. So we got to find another site. And that is one site that's been kicked around, is that Jackson Road site. We're calling it the Megados. It's a drop-off station that could potentially do a lot more than what our current drop-off station is, accept new items, do more processing, do better education, things like that. And the Jackson Road site, or the eco site, is one that we're looking at, and the city's looking at, the city and county are looking at a number of other locations, but they're looking at setting up drop-off stations in a number of locations around the county. So I think that might be, don't quote me on this because I don't know for sure, but I think that might be a fruit of the authority and the city working together to try to get drop-off stations more broadly available. But yeah, Jackson Road is one that we're looking at, and then the city, I think, and county are looking at other sites as well.
And so the same question for the reuse center. That's highly missed.
It sure is. I get so many calls about it all the time, and the the reuse center might not look the same at the Jackson Road site. It might have a different reuse component, but that's one of our base components. That's Recycle Ann Arbor's one of their base components is reuse, reduction, reuse, and recycling. So we will have another reuse center. I don't know exactly what it'll look like. It will probably be at the Jackson Road eco site, though.
I
don't know what the timing is for that either, because I don't have an exact time on that.
There is now bus service past there, isn't there, going to Chelsea or Dexter or something?
I'm not sure if there is or not, but I know there are many reuse centers along that. We call it the Jackson Golden Mile.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reuse centers along there, and that's right in that path of the other reuse centers. So it's not a bad location.
The nice thing about South Industrial was it was really convenient for people without transportation. So, well,
yeah, and those are our constituents, man. Those are the people. So how can we create opportunities for them? To the previous commissioners talking about inclusion and diversity.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're going to see it back someplace. Thank you.
We will, and I'm sorry I don't have the timing on what it looks like, but we will have a reuse component.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other questions for Brian? All right. Well, thank you, Brian. And,
thank you.
And we look forward to seeing the MRF in operation again. So let's end the screen sharing here and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is unfinished business. Chapter 40 update. Rita and Kathy.
Hi, I'll give a brief update, and that is that I'm not ready. But I do want to acknowledge and thank input from Chris Graham, Chris Vandenbroek, and Shannon Gibb Randall. kind of give me information that I can use to kind of combine. And I'm hoping to return it to a kind of a simplicity that we will bring to you, I hope, soon. I'll be reaching out to staff on the city to consult on whether there are any legal issues. And that's really about it for the moment. Kathy, would you like to add something?
Yeah, Kathy.
Yes, one of the reasons it's taking so long is this touches on so many different areas in terms of trying to naturalize safety, different types of vegetation. And it's going to require, I think that before we offer the revised ordinance, it's going to require educational materials that staff would prepare so that people really understand the intent here, as well as reducing the enforcement efforts. In my neighborhood, we still have vegetation, invasive species, basically 6+ feet tall, growing over the curb at school crosswalks. And if I report it, the city comes out and trims it or has the property owner, but then there's no follow through. It seems to be very reactionary, and somehow we have to get in front of this and be proactive. Just like with zero waste, it's going to take a change in the mindset. And so if anyone has any ideas, I'd really appreciate them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kathy. So anything more on that item, Rita?
Not right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for moving this forward. It's very important. So new business. Next item is a resolution honoring Card and Roger Rail. So let's see. Can somebody put it up on their screen? I think I don't have it. I think I can get it up on my screen if nobody else has it. Has anybody had a chance to look at it?
And while you're doing that, I'd just like to say that this is very similar to the resolution honoring Dan Bicknell a few months ago. And the intent was to honor both Dan and Roger, but we didn't want to do it at the same Environmental Commission meeting or the same council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And Roger has not had a chance to look at this, but as we did with Dan, I intend to send it to Roger just to make sure it's technically correct and give him an opportunity to make minor tweaks.
Right, I got it, so I can share it for you, Steve.
Okay, good.
Let me have the host function.
I think I've got it now.
All right.
Okay, I've got it now, Chris. Okay, thanks. So, let's see, this is the resolution. As Rita was saying, it's similar to the one that we passed some time ago now for commending Dan Bicknell for his work on Card in the dioxane remediation, the Gelman plume. So let's see, should we read this out loud? I will do that. Resolution to acknowledge and commend Roger Rail and the Coalition for Action on Remediation of Dioxane, abbreviated CARD, for a longstanding public service to monitor and protect residents of Ann Arbor from exposure to harmful chemicals in Ann Arbor freshwater sources. Whereas the Environmental Commission advises the Ann Arbor City Council on issues related to environmental policy, environmental issues, and environmental implications of all city programs and proposals on the air, water, land, and public health. And whereas Roger Rail founded the coalition, founded CARD, and has served as the chair since 2006. And whereas Roger Rail and members of CARD have held quarterly meetings to educate and organize members of the community about the threat of 1,4-dioxane in the groundwater. And Whereas Roger Rail has collected data, analyzed, and shared detailed information and encouraged members of the community to learn about the risks to water quality in Ann Arbor, Scioto Township, and Ann Arbor Township. Whereas Roger Rail has provided support to members of the community, local, state, and national elected officials via the CARD organization and the group Scioto Residents for Safe Water with respect to addressing 1,4-dioxane cleanup processes. And whereas Roger Rail and members of CARD have advocated for remediation of the 1,4-dioxane plume by the Environmental Protection Agency. And whereas meetings of CARD have routinely provided a forum for review of data on the 1,4-dioxane plume, tracking trends and communication with staff of both MDEQ and EGLE. Therefore, be it resolved that the Ann Arbor Environmental Commission commends Roger Rail and members of CARD for their long service to the community through professional activism and the use of scientific modeling, and resolved that the Ann Arbor Environmental Commission requests that Ann Arbor City Council provide a coordinating resolution of appreciation and respect to Roger Rail and members of CARD for their service, and resolved that the Environmental Commission recommends that the City of Ann Arbor send the commendation of Roger Rail and members of CARD for decades-long service to the leadership of Washtenaw County, the Washtenaw County delegation in the Michigan Legislature, the Director of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, the regional administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 5, Attorney General Dana Nessel, and Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Prepared by Commissioner Mitchell, Councilmember Griswold, September 15th, 2021. So this is the draft that we have before us. Kathy Griswold has her hand up.
I just want to mention that there's an E missing from the first therefore clause.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, therefore.
Yep. Well, this is a PDF file.
Oh,
so
okay.
I will have that corrected.
And the other thing I want to say that we can't underestimate the amount of political power CARD members have had in encouraging the governor to authorize the letter to the EPA. A protest was planned on the lawn of the Capitol on a Tuesday, and the day before, the governor authorized the letter. And without CARD, I don't think that the governor or the AG or the director of EGLE would be as familiar with the situation in Ann Arbor. We sort of take it for granted that everyone knows about and cares about the 1,4-dioxane, but they've really elevated this situation to a new level, along with the long time advocacy of Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. In fact, I said something at a political event to the AG, just talking about my concern about the 1,4-dioxane, and she actually said, "Oh, you don't have to worry. The EPA is here and Debbie Dingell is on it." And so that's not the way things should be, but it's but CARD has made all of that happen and raised the visibility of the problem. So I want to thank them.
Thank you, Kathy. Rita, you have the floor.
I just want to say that CARD is one of the groups that shows the impressive effect that multiple local government groups and individuals can have working together. It's really, really impressive.
Well, thank you. Any other comments? I would just like to add that for those of you who don't know, CARD has a website. You can look for further information, and it includes representatives from local elected representatives from local government and governments in the region where this groundwater plume is impacted. And it also has a representative from EGLE, the State Department of Environment. So it's been an intergovernmental organization that has held the polluters, try to hold the polluters accountable as far as Michigan law and federal law allows. And without their activity, not much would have been done. As I'll remind people, that this plume was discovered in 1984, I believe, and nothing's really, and it's been very difficult to get anything done in a meaningful way. So this was a big step, and it would not have happened without CARD. I believe that myself. So let's see, do I have a motion to accept? I think we've done with the discussion, so let's have a motion for a vote.
I move that we pass this resolution.
Do I have a second? Chris Graham, I believe. All who approve, say aye. Raise your hand. Anyone say no? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Hearing and seeing none, it's passed unanimously. So we'll forward. I'll edit the syntax and send it on to and we'll send it on to Galen, and he'll send it on to the county clerk. I mean the city clerk. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is Yang-Wen Jen wanted to discuss carbon taxing and carbon fee and dividend potentially. So Yang-Wen, you have the floor.
Yeah, the act I'm advocating for is Carbon Pricing and Dividend Act, is HR 2307. The act advocates for implement a $15 carbon tax on all fossil fuel at the source, excluding military and farming related fossil fuel inputs, and then from the tax collected, it will be returned to the low and middle income families as a form of dividends. And through this carbon taxing, it can drive fossil fuel prices up and provide an opportunity for renewable energy to rise in the market, thus move the economy toward a more sustainable and renewable energy side.
What action would you like to see the Environmental Commission take on this issue?
I would like us to endorse the act.
Okay. I should remind people that the Energy Commission in 2017 passed a resolution and it passed on to City Council. And City Council, I believe, acted on it as well to roughly approve the concept of carbon fee and dividend. We did not, I'm not aware of either the Environmental Commission, certainly, nor the Energy Commission, nor City Council endorsed this specific act, but they did endorse the concept.
Right. John Mursky sent an email and with the link on that was specifically passed that time, but not an act was actually referred on the resolution.
Yeah. Personally, I am a member of Citizens Climate Lobby, which is a long-standing organization that's been advocating for the solution to the climate crisis. I believe in it myself. There are issues have been raised by IPOC communities, indigenous and people of color communities, about whether this represents, an equitable means of addressing the climate emergency. And so I've circulated some materials. The NAACP in particular, has said some things about this. So my personal recommendation here in this forum is that we need to start a conversation with these communities about this issue. And we need to broaden the coalition of understanding because I do believe that there is a significant amount of misunderstanding about what's in the bill, and also and how it's going to be how it's going to go through, the whole legislative process in Congress. It's because of, as Bismarck said, the sausage is being made. It's hard to tell what it's going to look like. Nobody will get what they want completely. So this endorsement of this bill could be an important step, but I think it would be, my personal opinion is it would be better to draw these communities into the discussion and get more of a broader social and political consensus on this. I know there's some urgency because of the Build Back Better bill, including legislation and discussions in Congress that have been going on for a few weeks about this. I just want to add that the University of Michigan, the Seas Department, and the NAACP are going to have a joint discussion online about this issue on September 27th, I believe, from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. You can look at the University Seas website, the events website. It's event number 86551. So anybody who wishes to can register for this event and observe it online and pose questions, I believe. So that, this is my personal opinion, just to initiate the discussion. So I see other people have their hands up. Kathy Griswold and then John Calloway. You have the floor.
I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to schedule a community conversation or like an informal public hearing at our next meeting and allow maybe 30 minutes for public comment so that people who are concerned about this issue and the impact on equity could speak out, and we'd have a better understanding of all the issues. I personally support it, but I admit that I don't understand the equity issue at this time.
Okay, thank you. John, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Youngwen, if you've had any conversations with city staff about this and how this aligns with 820, or if they might have any concerns because of the different timelines, 2050 versus 2030. And I'd be very interested to have their input on, Ann Arbor taking a stand on that. How does that align with our current commitments around carbon neutrality?
Yeah, I haven't talked to city staff, but I think of this like Ann Arbor is moving at a faster pace than the nation. But I feel like if Ann Arbor endorses this act, is also showing our support for the nation to move forward. Because like showing support from the local government is important for the nation, and if this act can be passed at nation level, it also can help local governments to move forward. I think of it as like it's a two-way street.
Agree. I would just like to hear from the OSI staff of their what they think of this. If they're fully support it, and I'd feel much better about some type of endorsement from the council, from the commission. Sorry.
All right. I'll talk to them.
Okay, thanks. Chris, you have the floor.
It looks like there are 5 bills in Congress. Which one are we talking about? What number?
It's HR 2307.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Let's see, John, you still have your hand up, John Calloway. And Chris. So Rita has her hand up.
Yeah, I have done a little bit of reading about it, and it is a very complicated bill in terms of its administration. So I do think that it's worthwhile to review it and have that opportunity to ask questions. I'm a little concerned about some of the exclusions that are allowed that have greenhouse gas emissions related to them as just one thing that I'm aware of. And I have to do my own homework on it as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Chris, you still have your hand up. Oh, and you're muted.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm also wondering if the Energy Commission has had any discussions about this issue recently. I know Edie's just joined the Energy Commission, so I think it would be important to ask them as well as city staff if there's been a recent discussion there since 2017 when they passed the original resolution. You know, which was again just agreeing with the basic concept, which does seem just to me. I know part of the problem that I've heard with HR, specifically with HR 2307, is that there were some exemptions being carved out for conforming to the Clean Air Act in the meantime. I'm not sure what the implications were, but certainly frontline communities, which are generally communities of people of color and indigenous communities, we need to hear their voices, I think, on this issue and see what kind of a broader consensus that we can get. I mean, to me, this is just the way you have to build political will. So I think I would advise you, Yongwen. It seems we could bring up this discussion, and I also want to remember that the Environmental Commission, we can call for a public hearing outside of a regular commission meeting. We are empowered by our bylaws to call for a public hearing, and we could schedule a public hearing just on this issue. But I think it would be important to line up the ducks first. And if Yongwen, if you could engage with both OSI and the Energy Commission and see, make sure that we can get the voices in the room for a public hearing that we can schedule. And I would be happy to try to schedule it before our next meeting in October as a special meeting.
I think that would be beneficial to hear public comments.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I said that I think it would be really beneficial to hear public comments and people who are like minorities in here.
Okay, is there, I think Galen raised his hand. Yes, he did.
I just wanted to add that both the Ann Arbor branch of the NAACP is against it, as well as the national branch or national organization is against this. And I think it's good, even if we have public commentary, it has to be those comments from the people who are impacted, because Black folks and other, poor communities, we bear the brunt of pollution. And for, another community that doesn't go through those issues to say that we endorse this, that kicks equity out the window. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's good from those, from the folks who bear the brunt of the pollution, because you're going to give polluters an opportunity to say, okay, we're going to keep polluting, as opposed to saying, just quit polluting. Don't put a price tag on it, because they're not going to act in our best interest. They never have. Mm-hmm. So that's just something I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. So I think these concerns need to be addressed if we're going to get if we want to get a broad consensus. So I would suggest, Yongwen, if you're willing to drive this, if you try to get a spokesperson from the NAACP, the local NAACP, a spokesperson for Citizens Climate Lobby, and a spokesperson from the Energy Commission, and somebody from the Environmental Commission, of course, and let's see where we can go from there. And somebody from OSI, from the staff of the city staff. Okay. See if you can get a spokesperson from them. I can try to schedule a meeting, a public hearing on this issue online sometime in early October. But in the meantime, I would encourage everybody listening or anybody here to attend this, to register for this event on September 27th. It is. So it's not too far away. It's only 4 days away. I think it's the 27th, but it's, you can go to events.umich.edu/event/ and it's event number 86551 that I noticed just today. So I would encourage everybody to to attend that and see what happens during that discussion. And so, Kathy, you have your hand up.
Is the proposal then to expand the topic to be carbon taxes in general, not just this bill? And would that be necessary because this bill is going to be considered in the next couple of weeks? I just wonder what the timeline is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Young Wen?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So if we miss the window when this bill will be considered, first question is, what is that window? Do you know?
The window for which bill? The bill
for HR 2307.
I don't believe it's been discussed recently. I know like Biden's trying to pass it by November, so I think there's definitely time.
Oh, okay, good. All right. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to like influence the budget, which we don't have that much time. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. Edie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think, at least in my understanding, this is also being talked about as possibly a carbon tax being included by Senator Wyden in the reconciliation package, in which case we would have neither time nor probably a lot of ability to influence that one aspect necessarily. Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to flag that. I think I would agree that, a general conversation might be warranted, but this could all happen very quickly, potentially in the next 2 weeks if it does make it into reconciliation. So yeah, just something to flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, of course, we have very little influence on the federal government here. And city council does not have much influence on the federal government either. But I think it's important, as part of our role as the Environmental Commission, I think it's important for us to try to engage in setting up public conversations, to try to broaden, understanding and of these various issues and potential solutions to the climate emergency. So I would intend to go forward, and I'll try scheduling after Young Wen, if you've gotten some commitment for spokespersons. I will schedule a separate meeting outside of our normal monthly meeting to consider, just to have a public discussion about this issue, a public hearing. Okay.
I see. I'll go find spokespersons.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, because this debate doesn't end probably with the reconciliation bill. I'd remind people that this legislation has been crafted over a period of decades through many communities. But as usual in this country and societies in general, I think people of color, communities of color, have not been consulted as much as they should have. So I think that should be the major point. And I will circulate some basic information that people can review before such a public hearing. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is that acceptable to everybody? Any more comments? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for bringing it up. So the next item on our agenda is reports from committees, other commissions, council, and chair. So let's start with natural features.
Again, I wrote you all today expressing my apologies for being quite remiss the last couple months, and I will soon correct that.
Yeah, that's okay, Chris. So there's nothing to report. Pollinators?
Yes, there's a little bit of progress here. I just want to say that, whoops, that's not where my note is. There it is. Okay. We've had a really good response from Colin Smith in Parks, and I'll be talking with one of the park staff next week about exploring implementing some test alternate lawn spaces in parks. So that's just like the very start of it, to see if we can get some demonstration sites that people can look at and see if they want to use something other than regular turf grass for their yards, for those that want just plain open green space. I have connected through John Mursky's help with Jan Culbertson of the 2030 district, and we'll be working on a presentation on native plants and transformation of large spaces for large space landowners at one of the 2030 district meetings, probably in February or March. Ideally in time for them to actually implement something for the coming season. The climate ambassadors, thanks to Galen, are working to develop some more educational information that we're hoping to link to the NAPWED's website about pollinators. It would be just some changes to what's there already. And we'll be looking at connecting with some of our pollinator allies in the community, and getting a bigger kind of push to support in implementing native plant gardens, expanding people's gardens, et cetera, to support pollinators and sort of pollinator pathways in town. So that's kind of it. And I just want to close with saying that at this time of the year, this is a good time to think about yard and garden cleanup for the season. And I'm making a pitch to commissioners and people who may be watching to leave the leaves, which often contain pollinator cocoons, eggs, pupae that need some shelter over the winter. So it may not be necessary to fully vacuum up all the leaves in your yard. You might want to just put them in another place. Save your grass as you wish, but save some leaves, and don't put them all in the compost, because we really want the insects that may be there. So that's it for now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rita. Zero waste.
We've got two things going on, at least, but we are still waiting to hear from next cycle about the grant that Janie Petoskey and John Callaward and I wrote. And I heard from someone who works for the county this weekend when I went to the Trash Talk tour, which was amazing. I loved the Trash Talk tour. I hope it happens every year, and I hope next year I can be more helpful. But it was great. Anyway, the announcement of those awards is coming soon, so that would be excellent. And there's still work going on a white paper around zero waste, where there's an attempt to adjust to staff feedback. There are thoughts about possibly reshaping the thrust of it, because right now it proposes a zero waste goal. And I'm not sure that's the most fruitful way for us to move forward based on staff feedback, but we're clarifying the feedback that we've gotten and figuring out just how we can best expand composting and recycling, and at the same time really promote reuse alternatives and change people and help thinking about alternatives that we all have to buying new things. So that's where we are.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Lisa. I haven't done anything with construction and demolition over the last month. I did lead a bicycle tour for the Trash Talk tour. We had 7 people riding bikes around the sites. And in that regard, Lisa, I just mentioned that there is a new business down on Liberty Street, across in the basement, across Liberty Street, across from the post office, which called BYOC, or Bring Your Own Container, which will where you can reuse your containers from some bulk containers on site there. So that was a delightful place. And I found some compostable doggy bags. So I've been looking for them for years. Well, not years, but months. They're very hard to find online even. So these are bags, pet waste bags that you can bury. You can bury and they will dissolve to nothing. They're made out of corn, polymers from totally biological sourced, not petroleum sourced. So, so I'd encourage everybody to go visit that place. So, let's see. So that ends, I think, for committees. Other commissions. Let's have the energy report from the Energy Commission.
Hi. Yep. In the last meeting, we spoke about first the kind of context around community solar. We had a presentation from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and as well as some colleagues from Michigan, and kind of contextualized and explored possibilities for community solar in Michigan, as well as the future of community solar in Ann Arbor. We also talked about the HELP program, the Home Energy Labeling Program, which is intended to kind of inform and create a benchmark for prospective buyers, and then therefore kind of stimulate improvements in energy efficiency and other home improvements at the time of sale. So kind of an inspection and then a rating given at the time of sale. And so there will be a resolution on that at our next meeting, along with a conversation on municipalization of power system from some representatives from other municipalities that have taken that route in the past.
Okay, great, thank you. Is that it? Okay, so Planning Commission, Shannon.
Yeah, not a lot was directly applicable. I would say that the one thing is that we had a working session that gave us a lot more clarity about what we can ask for from developers in terms of sustainability elements. And I think we've been pretty cheeky with what we've been asking in terms of plans that come through. And, it can't hurt to ask kind of thing, but the planning director really gave us a much more fine-tuned sense of where our lane is with some of those things. And there's a lot of things that have to do with building code and things like that we have really no control over at all. And there are some things that we can do more effectively that are really in our lane, like around parking and things like that, and really trying to influence transit and transportation and things like that we may be better suited for. So I guess that's the thing that sticks in my mind the most. Otherwise, reviewing different developments that have come through. We're also looking at a kind of a site plan light for smaller projects too, but that again doesn't relate directly to environmental commission issues. So that's what I would say, unless Lisa, you can think of anything else that I've missed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Shannon. We don't have anybody here today for parks, but we do have an assignment from the Parks Advisory Committee. So let's see. Let's move on to council.
I can't think of anything that we didn't already cover this evening.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. And Chair, I was just going to mention the trash talk tour, but Lisa already did so, and I can say that this will be an annual event, probably in September. So it was fun standing on top of the old city landfill. I can tell you, it's the best view of Ann Arbor that you can get, and it's a lot bigger than I thought it was. A lot bigger than I thought it was. So,
the landfill or Ann Arbor?
Oh, the landfill.
Yeah.
The early years of whacking buckthorn in Ann Arbor, I remember going up there with loads of buckthorn on top of that hill.
Really? Wow. Well, they're mowing it pretty well now. The only thing there now besides grass is thistle.
Yeah, and methane.
And methane. Yeah, that's all being pumped. And bobolink nests. So, all right. So, items for next agenda. I intend to spend the bulk of the time for October and November. I would like to discuss solid waste issues. We haven't had a whole lot of that lately, and I think there's a lot to talk about. now that the MRF is starting up. And so, are there any suggestions for items for October? The October meeting? I'm hearing none. Yeah.
Stephen, is the Humane Society going to come and speak about deer, or is that in November?
No, that's still a possibility. That's still a possibility, Chris. But they've been dragging their feet.
Well, then I think we should go on and deal with a resolution about that for the council.
Yeah, I think November would be the proper time for doing that. Would you like to see it in October? Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
November's fine.
So that'll be on the November. That'll be on the November. Well, it's a joint November-December meeting. Remember, that's in the first Thursday of December.
Right. That'd be fine.
Okay. And so let's see. This we're getting to, so the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the second public comment period. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 1-888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 987-1499-1238. That's meeting ID number 987-1499-1238. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments and be patient. There could be a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. So Galen, is there anybody on the line?
There's no one on the line.
Okay, well, let's wait 25 seconds now. So meanwhile, I'd like to thank everybody for staying awake till 10 o'clock. I'm still going to try to keep these meetings down to 2 hours instead of 3. So, but we had a lot to discuss tonight. Is there anybody on the line yet?
There's no one on the line.
Okay, I'll call this meeting adjourned at 9:54 p.m. See you all later. Bye now.